Elijah of Buxton by Christopher Paul Curtis, Chapter 2. All right, this one is called Me and Mr. Frederick Douglass. And I already am thinking to myself, I want to say Frederick Douglass is he's a historical figure, um, but I could be wrong. Okay, here we go. Maybe this is not the Frederick Douglass I'm even thinking of. Maybe he was named after the famous Frederick Douglass. About the only good thing that came from Ma's snake in the cookie jar lesson was that there weren't no one else round to see it, not even Cooter. It would have been no time at all before everyone in the settlement knowed about that what happened. And even if Cooter and me are best friends, and he wouldn't do nothing on purpose, make me look low, I knowed that me running off from that snake like I'd done was such a good story that even a best friend couldn't have been blamed for letting it accidentally slip out. Especially a best friend like Cooter. The whole adventure would just turn into another one of them things that would be stuck onto my name forever. And doggone it all, seems like what people enjoy sticking to your name permanent ain't never good things. They're always tragical. I ain't the kind of person that complains for no reason, but I gotta say I already got one tragedy tied up with my name, so that is so horrible that it wouldn't be one bit fair that I get another. The tragedy that's so horrible put a scar on me that I'm a be carrying till the day I die. You'd think grown-up folks would cry when they saw me, but that don't happen at all. Even Ma and Pa try to act like it ain't all that noticeable, and that they ain't shamed to have folks see they're raising me, but I know better. It happened when I weren't nothing but a baby, and I can't see why I'm to blame. But that's when the famousest, smartest man who ever escaped from slavery stood on a tall stage that got built on the schoolhouse and raised me up way up over his head in front of a crowd of people. Aha! I knew it. Frederick Douglass is somebody who's famous. From the way Pa tells it, the man must have had me 20 feet up in the air. He was giving a speech when the accident happened, because every time he made a point, he gave me a little shake way up there over top of his head. I weren't even a year old back when Mr. Frederick Douglass and Mr. John Brown visited Buxton. Pa said all the settlement people had got excited and worked up something terrible about them coming and were dashing round, trying to polish Buxton up. Sort of like the way you rub the dirt off your Sunday shoes if you knowed Mr. Travis was going to give them a hard look. They rushed to get the new schoolhouse finished so there'd be a place big enough for the meeting. They made sure the picket fences in front of everyone's home had got a good slap of whitewash on them. They made all kinds of food and they even had a special blanket made out of sewed together flowers to go across Flapjack, the mule's back, so he could lead a parade. All this fussing was going on because folks in Buxton were going to celebrate 3 special people at this big meeting. Special person number 1 was Mr. Frederick Douglass, because he used to be a slave, just like most folks here in Buxton, and now they say he can talk the bees out of flying to the flowers. Special person number 2 was Mr. John Brown, because folks say, other than maybe Reverend King, the man who started Buxton, there weren't no white man ever made that was better than him. Special person number 3 was me, because I was the very first child to be born free in the Elgin settlement at Raleigh in Canada West, what we call Buxton. Mrs. Guest, who's the best sewer and knitter in the settlement, had even gone and knitted some fancy clothes for me that Ma still keeps in a peculiar smelling box made out of cedar wood. Me and Ma have a pretty good disagreement about them clothes, 'cause to me they look a powerful lot like a girl's dress and a bonnet. When I got grown enough to understand what it was they paraded me round in, I was just as much shamed about the clothes that they forced me to wear as I was about the accident twixt me and a special person number 1. Pa said everything was all right with the celebrating until the parade got to the schoolhouse and most of the speechifying was over. That's when Mr. Douglas came and took me from Ma, walked high up on the stage with me, and held me in the air over his head. Ma said she was worrying right off because Mr. Douglas was an excitable man when he gets talking, and he started bouncing me up and down and swinging me round with joy, saying I was a shining beacon of light and hope for the future. I think he means beacon of light, not bacon of light. I asked Ma what that meant, and she couldn't say. Don't seem to me like that getting called a piece of meat off a pig is anything that you could get excited about. But Mr. Douglas thought it was great, and folks kept cheering, and he kept tossing me up and down till the accident happened. Ma says even back then I was a fragile child, and the more he tossed me, the more she was fretting. She said I was having a whole lot of fun, then I smiled real big, and without no kind of warning at all, the accident happened. I throwed up everything I ate over Mr. Douglas' beard and jacket. I learned from Ma that people who used to be slaves love prettying up any kind of story. She says talking is the only thing they used to get to do without no white person telling them how to do it, how or when, so they make the most out of it once they get the chance. She says they love making a summer day a lot hotter than it really was, or making rain or drought last a lot longer than they really did. And they especially love telling you how their great-great-grandpa or grandma used to be the king or queen of Africa. Bad as my luck is, the people that live in Buxton ain't choose up to pretty up the fact that I'm most proud of myself for, my rock chunking. They've prettied up what happened twixt me and Mr. Frederick Douglass. They'll tell you I throwed up at Mr. Douglas for a whole half hour before Ma came and snatched me away and pointed me out the schoolhouse window. They say I near drowned the man. Some folks swear I throwed up so hard that desks and chairs rose up and floated out of the schoolhouse. Mr. Polite said I throwed up so plentiful that didn't no deers, no rabbits die in the woods for 5 years after. He said the bears and the wolves ate my vomit for that long since it was considerable easier for them to do that than try to run down some animal that weren't looking to get et. And that don't make no sense. That don't make no sense at all. First off, because they're always telling us how smart Mr. Frederick Douglass is, they tell us he can talk Greek like Greek and Latin like a Latin, Greek like a Greek and Latin like a Latin. And anyone who's that smart ain't gonna sit and hold no baby over his head that's throwing up on him for a whole half hour. I could understand if he was surprised at first. Ain't no one gonna expect to get thrown up on by a baby boy in a girl's dress and a bonnet. You guys getting that picture in your head? But if Mr. Douglas is near smart, as folks say, seems to me he'd have had the sense to aim me out the window himself. Seems to me, if I really did throw up for a whole half an hour, only the first 5 minutes would have been on Mr. Douglas. The last 20 minutes would have had to be out that window. It also don't make sense about the bears and the wolves either. 'Cause if they were coming into the settlement 3 times a day to eat what I throwed up, this would have been a mighty unsafe place. But didn't none of the grown folks act worried about sending their children off to do no chores? Back when I was about 5 or 6, Ma told me to fetch a bucket and go into the woods behind our home and pick her some blueberries. This is probably one of the reasons Ma thinks I'm a fragile boy. I remember soon she told me to go, I got all afeared and shakety. I said, by myself? She said, it ain't that far, Elijah. I'ma keep watch over you. But Ma, what about all those bears and wolves? What if I'm out there and they come for their supper? She smiled and said, Elijah, don't be silly. Ain't no wild creatures like that been around these parts since before you was born. I said, but Ma, how come everybody keeps telling me about what I done to Mr. Douglas that got all the bears and wolves coming to the settlement looking for something to eat? She laughed and told me some of that grown-up folks talk, some of that talk that makes it so's you ain't never sure about much of nothing. She said, son, you got one of them sets of mind that's going to have you fretting about the littlest things. Life's going to be tough rough to hoe for you If you don't learn, you can't be believing everything folks tell you, not even grown folks. Hoeing, you guys, is turning over dirt and pulling up the weeds when you garden. 1 minute, Ma, who's got a good head for thinking, tells me I got to respect everything that grown folks say, and the next minute she's wanting me not to believe some of the things the same grown folks tell me. If that don't leave you scratching your head, you got a better brain than me. And that's it for chapter 2.